Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, December the 3rd in the beautiful Memorial Arena in Victoria. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it happen, because I suddenly realized that if they weren't doing this, you and I would be talking to ourselves. So I want to start off, I don't think it's been a good week for the world, but health workers now, it seems, must get vaccinated. I don't know if it's all the health workers in the hospital, but nurses now do. They have to get vaccinated or wear a mask. And this seems crazy because, you know, it's interesting that nurses and doctors and all the people who work in hospitals traditionally don't want to get vaccinated. Doesn't that tell us something? The nurses and the doctors don't want to get vaccinated, but now they're forcing them. And who is forcing them? It's, I guess, the pharmaceutical companies standing behind it all. And they, along with the rest of the corporate world, controls our governments. So the governments do it to us. They make the rules and the laws. And then the media's job is to make sure we almost never hear about it, or it's not an issue. I mean, when did this debate happen? Was it Christy Clark, I'm not a bully, Christy Clark, who made this decision? And we're next, we're all next. This is, we're all next. And because,
Well, I believe it's the Ministry of Health that actually legislates it. The thing is too, Jack, you know, I'd love to see the evidence that shows that vaccinations are actually effective. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary that says that the vaccination programs really don't prevent that much illness. So, and when you weigh that out with the possibilities of ill effects and bad side effects, it really doesn't make any sense. But the thing is, you know, the chief medical health officer is saying that you have to have it done. And you know, we've had experience with this guy before, and he doesn't rely on science. He relies on other agendas that we really aren't aware of. So, I mean, it's a very serious issue. I think the public should be demanding good science to be done on it and good research to be done on it, but at the moment there isn't any.
well, there is this group called the Cochrane Commission or something.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting the name wrong, but it is a group of, I think, researchers from around the world. And I think the story is that they say flu vaccines are not of any use, especially in many age groups. A lot of people say they're harmful. Now, there's been a suggestion that somebody in the government misquoted what this group of researchers said. And they actually wrote a letter saying, no, we've been misquoted. And even something like that doesn't get into the media, because the media's job is to make sure we don't know what's going on.
It seems, but you know, in my view, the fact that the vaccines don't work for the corporate interests, this is perfect. For it not to work means you have more sick people. You have more sick people going into hospitals. You have, you know, you have the whole grinding corporate chemical, you know, pharmaceutical industry that just does great, but they just, the icing on the cake is
More
to
people
have
sick.
is to force vaccinations. And by the way, you know, there's with all these rules about not having to declare full content of the vaccine, we really don't know for sure exactly what is in the vaccines. I mean, can you think about that? I mean, the corporations' worldwide agenda are vaccinating us now for flus, imaginary or otherwise. We're really treading on thin ice here. I think we should be really stepping back and saying, no, we need more evidence before we proceed.
I've never seen any evidence. I mean,
No.
this is what I'm told, but so there we are. I mean, on a very important issue, we deserve better from our politicians and our public health officials and our media, and the better we deserve is just to have them give us truth, the science, the actual science, not
And the health critic, of course, in the provincial government should be on this and should be making headlines, asking questions.
Yeah, we should know, and then we can deal with the realities. ISIS. German media, I understand, is reporting that ISIS is operating out of Turkey. In other words, ISIS has bases in Turkey where they're protected, and they're operating out of Turkey. Now, Turkey is a NATO ally, and Turkey is participating in the attack against ISIS. There's lots of reports that ISIS is being funded by the United States and other allies. Canada is now talking about starting to bomb in Syria. These talks are being, I mean, there's just the smallest little blurbs you get. So now, I mean, bombing a sovereign nation in order to fight a terrorist group that's being funded by yourselves that's where we're at. It's completely insane.
Well, you know, I would love to get to the bottom of it, but you can't check their story, their version of ISIS and their version of the war. Really, we don't. How many people have died in the war, in this bombing? How many ISIS, you know, how many enemy combatants have they killed? What does ISIS really want? Do they want to become a sovereign government? You know, are they really trying to seek some kind of legitimacy someplace? Nobody seems to even know who they are, even in Syria and in Iraq. So, I mean, we're in a situation where we just hear this news every day, and what do we know? We really don't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah. So we just can't believe what the news tell us. I mean, it's pathetic. But I have been trying to get a story into the corporate media. I contacted CFAX, and CFAX is not just a small town station. CFAX is part of Bell Media, which is one of the biggest corporations in the country. Bell also owns CTV, the entire network. They own another radio station in Victoria, a music station. I don't remember which one. So I contacted CFAX, and I'm contacting them right now. Hello, CFAX. You know, if you listen to the news on CFAX, I mean, they find out things and they report that are not that important to be in the news. But I want them to cover the story about the fact that the Bush family was involved in a bank in the late 1920s and early 1930s that was funneling money from powerful American people and very wealthy people and corporations, funneling money to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. And that story, I think, is very important right now, because what we say about ISIS seems to be exactly the same thing. Is it true? I mean, there's no question that happened. You know, the Bush family was used as a funneling mechanism to pour money into Nazi Germany and create Nazi Germany in order, I guess, to start a war. And now money, and it's always completely secret. And now the same is happening with ISIS. Why won't CFAX or any of the media, I don't want to pick on CFAX, why won't any of the media report this horrible but true story to us?
Wow, you could speculate. I mean, I think, you know, the bottom line is usually money. War is a great business. You know, you just go to any government and say, we have to have a war, and the taxpayers pick up the tab for decades sometimes. There's no accountability. You don't really have to produce any justification. And all the large corporations are part of the war industry. So I think the money aspect is big. And of course there's power.
Control.
Controlling the agenda, keeping democracy away.
Because there's a very powerful movement, I think, throughout many, many Western countries to focus on the corporations and say, we know you're the problem, and we're fighting you as best we can. We're going to try to stop you. And in those situations, the power structure, which in today's world, the power structure is the corporations, they start wars in order to focus attention somewhere else while they continue and even become stronger.
Well, you know, George Orwell wrote about, in 1984, you know, about the perpetual war and how important it is to always have a war on the go, an outside enemy, because, of course, that's the way you maintain control of your population. When you have an outside enemy, you can't really demand true democracy. The government has to make, you know, autocratic decisions, and they're saying they're doing it to protect the citizens always. And, you know, they have us in this catch-22. People are fearful, people don't know what to believe, and then eventually they get controlled. So, I mean, we're in that type of situation with the ISIS situation, I think.
Well, that's a scary thought. I mean, you know, what you just said is really where we are, and yikes. Amalgamation? I mean, what do you talk about after something like that? I don't know. Climate change. Well, the only thing that's worse in the world is climate change.
Well, let's talk a little bit about amalgamation, Jack.
Okay.
I got a couple of takes on it that I've been thinking about it. You know, I haven't been in town for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but anyway, you know, they're talking about amalgamation so that we can have more coordination amongst all the municipalities. Which, you know, on the face of it sounds like a pretty good idea. But we already have a CRD, a Capital Regional District, that has a board and that are appointed by the mayors of the municipalities.
And sometimes actually elected. You can vote for who you want.
But it's not binding.
Okay.
The mayor still can choose. So, but to me, number one, it makes a lot of sense. If you have a group of people that can make billion-dollar decisions, like on this crazy sewage treatment plant that they are still trying to build, you know, and they want to blow $1 billion on it with a big B, you know, those people should be accountable. And I think the only way you can make them accountable is to have to be directly elected. It's not very complicated. They already have this. They already have the organization, and all you have to do is to hold an election and elect these board members. That would be a direct accountability. That would be democracy. And I just hate to say it, but it'll be the last thing that'll ever happen, because the mayors don't want to see that. The councilors don't want to see that. They're going to lose some power. You know, the system is so gerrymandered the way it is right now. That's why the CRD, in my opinion, got as far as they did with the sewage treatment plan, because nobody could stop them. They weren't accountable. And
I would say also the media played a big role in it, because from the beginning there were big questions about that whole plan, but none of those questions were ever told to the public. I mean, there were things going on that are unbelievable, but it was never reported in the media, and the media refuses to tell the people the truth, and it allows these crazy agendas to move on, because they are the agendas. These things don't happen by accident.
you know, you and I were involved in something in the past with the water board back in the 90s. We wanted that water board to be directly elected. The water board was some entity that nobody could really understand who they were, how they were developed, and they were looking at this new governance structure. So we had all these consultants. Remember, they had all the hearings and everything, and they had all these consultants. Some of them were right, you know, NDPers and all that. They were all thinking we got to review the governance structure of the water board. And we went to a meeting, Jack, and we were insisting on putting on the agenda as an option to directly elect that water board. And those people wouldn't let us put it on the agenda. Now, this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah, they were standing there saying, what ideas do people have for you know, for this, what we're going to... And like
Yeah.
we'd say, you know,
Why don't
directly
we
elect
elect
the
them?
water board, and the guy would say that's a good idea, but he wouldn't write it on the
Yeah.
paper. Everything else got written down, but that idea they would not write down. It's just, you know, it's crazy, and that's the
But
way
Jack,
things work.
look at the connection here. The water board got rolled into the CRD, and the CRD is buried in layers and layers of bureaucracy, of unaccountability, and it's rife with agendas, full of conflicts of interest.
So what we need is a spotlight to be shone into there. That's
Yeah.
what we need to find out what's going on and make them all accountable. I mean, has
Yeah.
anybody paid a price for this billion-dollar disaster of sewage treatment that they almost got us into? I mean, you know, the senior staff, they carry on as before. Most of the politicians carry on
Was
as
it a burning
before.
election issue, Jack?
No, it wasn't. And it was Esquimalt that saved us from it.
That's right.
And if we have amalgamation, then
Yeah.
the opportunities for one city to stop something stupid are going to be lost. My own take on amalgamation is if it makes sense and if it's going to be better for the city and for us, let's do it. But I'd like to see some actual information somewhere. You know, CFAX has been pushing amalgamation hard for years, but they never give us actual information. That's what we need. So we can make an
Toronto
intelligent decision.
amalgamated, and look what happened to them. Their taxes doubled, and their council is totally unaccountable. And you know, and you have the Rob Ford strangeness and all that. Back
Yeah.
east in Halifax, they amalgamated. Municipalities around the city of Halifax, same thing. Services were cut, taxes doubled. And you can't find any examples where that type of amalgamation works. See, what I'm saying is, Jack, we have the CRD. The structure for regional governance is already here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's simple. Just elect these guys. And I think the pro-amalgamation people are terrified of that idea. So they're going to push the amalgamation idea, and because they know they can gerrymander that, and they can, you know, make it hard for the citizens to get involved in it. And to me, the people, there's so many people that are resentful and disdainful for democracy and the process of democracy and citizen engagement and all that. They think they're the experts. They think they know better. They think they're going to just, you know, you and I and the rest of the citizens really don't know what we should have, so they're going to decide for us. And I really think that they believe they're right. And you know, you can't get through to these people.
Yeah, on a lot of issues. That's just true. As I said, for me, the issue is if it works, I'm for it. I'd like to know, I mean, you mentioned Toronto and Halifax. I mean, that should be easy to get. The studies, the
Yeah.
information should be right there on the city's page, and it should be in the media, and we should be led towards it. The city should be, or, you know, give us the information. So
Why do you think we're not hearing about it?
Well, of course, I fear the worst.
Yeah, because it doesn't work. And I think, you know, you could have situations where some municipalities, Central Saanich and North Saanich, maybe they should amalgamate. You know, they have their interests are fairly similar. Maybe Metchosin and Souk, they're out there. You know, although people of Metchosin and Souk are probably going to hate me for saying that.
Probably.
Then there's Langford.
But it's up to everybody.
Royal.
It's up to everybody what they want to do,
You know, so you could see some amalgamations like that.
or not.
You know,
I
and
don't know
they
which
could
way
make up
people
their
would vote.
own minds. It's up to those municipalities to make those decisions.
Yeah.
It should not be imposed.
Yeah, and as long as people know the facts and figures, but honest information, real information about, and then there should be a way out in a couple of years too. Why not?
Yeah.
There's a climate change conference going on in Lima, Peru right now, I think. I mean, I really haven't heard anything about it, but somebody sent me a story which said that what they're saying there is that we are on the verge of making the Earth uninhabitable. And it's almost to the point where it doesn't matter if we do start to change, because it's already too late. So that's where we are, which, you know, me and my friend talked about this a few days ago, and we both laughed, ha 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 ha. Yeah, the earth uninhabitable, what does that mean? But I mean, that's literally where we're at.
Yeah.
And we can't seem to even take any steps in the right directions.
Well, Canada's taking great leadership roles.
Yeah.
You know, I think the estimate is there's going to be 2 million new vehicles sold in Canada in the next 2 years. Most of them are going to be SUVs and trucks.
Yeah.
You know,
So we're killing
guzzling
ourselves.
vehicles.
Yeah. And they won't build us a safe, efficient, affordable, comfortable, quiet, pleasant public transit system. They just won't do it.
Well, you know, it's a perfect crime in this case because the petroleum industry is heavily invested in the automobile industry, and what you do, impose heavy gas guzzling vehicles on people, so they have to pump gas into them. So give the vehicles away. That's fine. It's like giving people cell phones, because you're going to pay through the nose when you go to the pump, and you're going to have these great big gas guzzling vehicles, and there's no rewards for building small cars. So we're taking a leadership role, like, you know, we're heading over the falls, and our government's rowing towards the falls.
So the only thing I can think of saying is it's up to us. Start phoning your politicians. I don't think they want to hear from us, but you know, they hear from the lobbyists and they hear from the backroom boys and girls all the time, so they should hear from the citizens. Phone your politicians, phone your media, and do your best. I mean, it's late in the game, that's for sure.
And drive a small, fuel-efficient automobile, and don't drive it too much.
Walter, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Hello and welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. Our guest in this segment is Jacinda Mack. We're going to be talking to start with about Mount Polley. And Jacinda, you're with the NSTQ, so you can tell everybody, including me, what it is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for having me here today. The NSTQ is the Northern Secwepemc de Gelmuk, and that's our name in our language. It's inclusive of 4 northern Shuswap communities. That includes Soda Creek, Williams Lake Indian Band, Canham Lake, and Canoe Creek. And so we're involved as a collective in the BC treaty process. Okay. So within that collective, we have our 4 communities, and we're negotiating as one people.
Can you say what NSTQ is again? Because I think a lot of people, including me, missed it.
Okay, it's the Northern Secwepemc de Gelmuk. So it's the people of the Northern Shuswap.
Okay, and for people to find it on just a regular map of BC, it's a big kind of circle around Prince George, maybe?
Well, in our area, it's from like Barkerville down to like the Canoe Creek area around Clinton inclusive. So the larger Secwepemc Nation goes down into Adams Lake area. It's quite a large. It's pretty much the whole southern interior of British Columbia. Yeah, it's quite large.
So you're in town today on December 3rd to talk at Camosun College about, I think, Mount Polley and also your mining policy. So you wanted to talk about what's happening right now with the Mount Polley disaster.
Right. I just wanted to give a bit of an update on the work that's been done to date. All of the work that's been done by Mount Polley, they've been working around the clock since the disaster happened on August 4th. And I mean 24 hours a day. And what that work has focused on is containing as much as possible the remainder of the spill. So there's the tailings that are still in Hazeltine Creek. There are the tailings that are up at the top outside of the dam area in front of Polley Lake. And then there are still all of the tailings that are remaining in the tailings storage facility. So this is the facility, the waste facility that ruptured and released into the environment. So they've built containment dikes, they've built rebuilding roads, reinstalling bridges so that the accesses around the area are reinstated. And really now all of the work is focusing on preparing for spring freshet when the big melt comes in May and June. It's in an interior rainforest, so there'll be a lot of water coming down the mountain. So they're building structures to divert water and to contain the tailings in a way so that there's not a second or third repeat events.
How serious is the environmental disaster?
Well, at this time, there's so many questions, and it takes time to get the analysis of those to those questions. So we have more questions than answers right now. So we're 4 months in, which in the larger scope of things is very, very early. So a lot of people have asked questions around the salmon. What's going to happen with the salmon? We really don't know until the next few years play out within those life cycles of how it's going to affect spawning, how it will affect the juveniles that are in the lake right now. It takes a lot of time for that information to come in. So it feels like a really long time, and it feels like a very short time at the same, in the same space. There's a lot of information that we're waiting on. The investigative panels are still ongoing. The first independent panel investigation report is due on January 31st of 2015. And there are other investigations going on as well. The RCMP, the Conservation Officer Society, Mount Poly has done its own investigation.
How serious is the amount of, toxins, poisons, chemicals, etc., that were in that lake and got the tailings pond lake?
Right.
My understanding is that it's one of the most serious mining disasters ever in the world in terms of amount of dangerous materials released.
Well, within the tailings, so about 30% of the tailings that were in the tailings storage facility were released when the dam breached. All of the water that was in the processed water was also released into the environment. So it's a lot of the testing that's been done, like I was saying, it's over time, because what happens is you have these heavy metals that are bound to the tailings, which is the waste rock. So it's like you have this piece of rock, and then you have the metals that are attached to it. So whether or not those metals become available into the environment and can be taken up into salmon or to smaller species within the lake and then are built up through the ecosystem takes time. So right now, all of that testing is ongoing, and we don't have any real conclusive answers at this point. But we have involvement, we have some partnerships with different organizations who are helping us with that work, and we also have hired top experts in the field to assist us in looking at what the company's doing and understanding this process and helping us ask the right questions.
So your group, the NSTQ, has come up with a mining policy of your own. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the mining policy and how it's being received.
Okay. Well, this has been a work in progress for many years. It started off as a response to the overwhelming mining within our territory. So if you remember back to the 1860s, the Caribou Gold Rush that was in Barkerville, that's right in our territory. And so we've been dealing with mining for a very long time and the impacts of mining for a very long time. This is ongoing because we live in a mineral-rich zone. There's a lot of gold where we live. So there's a lot of people who want to get that gold. So we have a lot of different claims in our area. It's pretty much saturated for the claims all over the territory. So we wanted to come up with a process that we have developed based on the best mining practices that are currently available in the world. So we worked very closely with Amy Crook and her organization that's called the Fair Mining Collaborative, and they did extensive research, thoroughly researched mining laws from around the world and current practices that are used. So when we are requesting a certain, within our policy saying we want it done this particular way, we also have the research to back it up saying, it's done in this country, in this country, in this country. This is especially useful as a leverage tool to say it is being done in other parts of the world and this is the best practice for what you're proposing. So that's really cutting edge. It's not just a framework around, kind of generalities. It's very prescriptive, which is very new. And it's been very well received. So it was released on December 1st. And within that time, we have almost 800 downloads. We've made it publicly available on our NSTQ website. And it's almost 800 downloads today within 2 days. So that's pretty exciting.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the So, for example, you're talking about best practices.
Yes.
Where do current practices in BC show up on a best practices 1 to 10 list?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're talking about specifically, but for a large part, a lot of the mining regulation and policy in British Columbia hasn't changed a lot over the years. So we have a lot of outdated practices that that aren't reflective of, for example, the current political situation regarding title in British Columbia. It just didn't address that when mining policy was first created in the 1860s to deal with the gold rush. And it also doesn't deal with the super scale extractive industry that mining has become on a global level, the super industry. When you're thinking about the 1860s gold processing, you've got gold pans and sluice boxes and pickaxes and a really manual.
Very small.
Yeah, and so now you're dealing with 120-ton dump trucks and super electric shovels, and it's a completely different type of mining.
Grinding up, I think, huge amounts of rock in order to find small amounts of whatever.
Yes, it's a huge feat of engineering, what they do today. But there has to be safer regulation around how that is done, how those approvals come through. So what our policy does is it sets up a very clear process of what we expect as those best practices as our minimum standard in our territory, and it's a living document. So as things change and progress, it will be adapted. And so we've made it available to the public to say, take this, use this. If this applies to your, where you have mining in your area, this is something to look to. If you want to know what the best practices are, this is a good place to start.
So what are, I guess the best practices are there mainly to protect the environment.
Yes.
So what are you suggesting be done differently?
Well, with the best practices, it actually covers a wide range of things. So it talks to relationships that have to be formed with communities that are directly impacted. So even before a mine goes in and you're talking about very specific technical aspects, there are, for example, we are the Indigenous people with title and rights and responsibilities within our territory. We call that territory Sechwepemchuluch. It's our land, our entire integrated way of life. And so the mining policy sets out, before you even get to the point of putting a drill in the ground, there are certain protocols that you need to be aware of. And so one of the things that companies have said to First Nations in a lot of different places is that, well, we don't really know what process you're expecting, or we don't really know what the protocols are. So this is a way of clearly spelling that out to anybody who we need to work with, or any new operations, to say, oh, I know what to expect, I know what the protocols are.
Well, that sounds like a good idea for anything new that's kind of coming into the neighborhood. Is you talk to and deal with the people who are there. Okay, so how does that progress?
Well, I think over the next few months we're going to see exactly how this integration of this new policy is going to occur. So it's, there's different processes of where we can start. There may be things that are agreed to right away, where the government says, yeah, we think that's a good idea. And the company says, yeah, that's doable, right? So we start with wins, and there may be areas that we disagree on, but at least it sets up a process for how we're going to move forward, right? There may be things that we disagree on, or that's where that leverage comes in to say, well, this is a best practice, and they do this in other parts of the world, so it is doable. It's not just, some made up pie in the sky request. It's very well and thoroughly researched. So it sets up a framework for discussion, and it's, we're coming from a position of a very informed position to say, we know what is being done and this is what we expect.
Okay. So let's say there are a couple of mines operating in an area and people don't want another one, but a company comes along and says, we're going to make some money here. Mm-hmm. How does that play out?
Well, within our territory, we have 3 operating mines already that have been approved and have been operating, 3 open pit mines. There is another proposed mine in the area, And so this would play into the environmental assessment. This would play into the types of impact assessments that would have to be done before a mine is approved. So it goes through all the different stages of mine approval. So if that was something that was decided, we say, okay, well, we don't agree with this particular new proposed mine, we could set out the criteria for why. So we would be able to very succinctly say, for this reason and this reason and this reason, it's out of compliance. The other piece that we're working on is the cumulative impacts of the area. So it's not just mining. We also have a lot of forestry interests in the area. There's a lot of other pressures on the land, grazing, so it's looking at the big picture, that all together what that looks like. And so we're really stressing that, a lot of, especially when you're talking about mining, it comes down to water, because water is really heavily impacted. You need a lot of water to process, the mill, in the processing in the mills for mining.
What is the water used for?
It's
the
used,
grinding?
yeah, in the grinding process.
So again, you're grinding huge amounts of rock and turning it really into almost dust?
Like a flour, they call it a rock flour, yeah.
And then, that gets stored in the tailings ponds.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
just to go back to tailings ponds, my understanding is they're built or engineered to last for 1,000 years. Is that correct?
Well, they're supposed to survive into perpetuity, yes.
That's because this stuff remains potentially dangerous, essentially forever. But nothing we build is going to last, 1,000 years, 100 years. So, it's almost as if we do this kind of mining the way they're doing it now, you're just passing on the disaster to some future generation, but it's going to happen no matter what, because nobody's going to be taking care of these tailings ponds, and they're all going to open up.
Well, that's our concern, is that we are planning for the future, and that the maximum safety standards become the standard. So it's looking those 7 generations into the future, looking at what our responsibilities are today. If there's a new mine or an existing mine that needs to be updated to a higher standard, then that's what should happen. And because of the disaster that happened at the Mount Poly mine, British Columbia ordered that all current tailing storage facilities be inspected to ensure that they're in compliance.
Too bad they didn't do that a few months before it happened.
Yes, well,
which of course they should have done.
Yes, and there has been some discussion in the media about the reduced amount of inspections that have happened over the years. So, having a best practice would be, for example, that every mine receive a full and thorough inspection that's publicly disclosed to ensure that those safety standards are being met, and if there are problems that they're dealt with, and that the company is responsible for ensuring the safety, the public safety, and that they're built to a standard that will withhold all kinds of criteria if they're in earthquake zones, or if they're in high water areas, like Mount Poly mine's in an interior rainforest. It gets a lot of water, a lot of snow. So accounting for that and using really high factors of safety when they're engineering these structures.
Yeah, well, I guess as we move into the future, we've got to decide which way it is we want to go. I don't know if we can keep moving in these directions. But I don't know what the alternatives are either, a simpler life.
Well, this policy too, it's not about shutting down mining. It's about, we have 4 operational mines in the NSTQ in the Northern Secwepemc area. So we have to deal with these. This is a reality, right? And we have very complex relationships with these mines. They employ a lot of people, including our own people. We have members who work at these mines as well. So coming up with a process where we can work on these issues and make things safer, which is better for everybody, because we get First Nations are often criticized for saying, well, if your policies mean shutting down an industry, that has a lot of repercussions too. This policy isn't about shutting down an industry, it's about making it safer, more accountable, and ensuring that the First Nations are actively engaged in the process and actively engaged in the co-design. Like, we have our experts working in the co-design of responding to what's happening at Mount Poly mine for cleanup and remediation, restructuring Hazeltine Creek, looking at all of the different components that need to happen. So we're actively at those tables, discussing this with the company and the ministries.
Yeah, well, I really wish everybody good luck with that, and I understand what you're saying. It's the reality of the world, and we all got to deal with it somehow.
Absolutely, and I think that if we can take something that's based on the best practices, that's a really good place to start.
And start moving in more positive directions.
Absolutely.
So Jacinda Mack, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Wednesday, December the 3rd. I'd like to thank again our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. Our guest in this segment is John Farquharson. John, we're going to be talking about local issues, and John is also going to be starting a new show in the not too distant future called
CRD in Context.
CRD in Context. We're going to be talking about a few different things today, but the overriding issue is an improved decision-making process, because God knows there have been a lot of bad decisions made, and no doubt some good ones too, but we tend to focus on the big problems.
Yeah, well,
I hope there's some good ones.
well, there may be some good ones, undoubtedly there are, but they haven't been in the area that's looming on the horizon and that we've been dealing with for the last several years, and that's infrastructure. Very poor decisions have been made both in the City of Victoria and at the CRD with respect to infrastructure projects. The CRD has spent $60 million on a sewage treatment plant that is now essentially stalled and is on its way into the trash basket. $60 million, is that good decision making?
And you're absolutely right, but thank everything that we were able to stop at 60 million, because if we didn't stop at 60 million, we were heading for $1 billion for a project that a lot of people think would not do anything to help the environment, which is what it was supposed to do.
Well, we're still going to spend money, but that 60 million, that's basically lost.
That's lost.
Okay, maybe 40 million's lost, but anyways, there's a lot of money. Tens of millions of dollars have been wasted. Again, as a result of poor decision making. And the bridge, during the Blue Bridge replacement, during that decision making process, the people were told that it was going to be $77 million, and now we're going to be north of 100 million. Again,
actually, I'll just interrupt there, because originally we were told, or we weren't told, that the original price was under $10 million. For a repair, which was the initial recommended option from the engineers. And somehow, talk about poor decision making, that option was quickly pushed aside, never to be mentioned again by anybody, including the media, and here we are now, as you say, north of 100 million.
Yeah, so again, I think that's poor decision making, and I think that what we're seeing is, we saw a huge, not across the CRD. The increase in voting in the CRD was up 4 or 5%. That's good. In Victoria, it went up from around 26% to 39%.
Wow.
And I think in part it was due to the fact that people are getting really concerned about the quality of decision making that's going on, both at the City of Victoria and in the CRD. So they got out and voted. And
are those votes going to lead to better decision making?
Well, it led to new decision makers being put into place, and in particular, two major decision makers. Mayor-elect Lisa Helps, and now Mayor Richard Atwell. Okay, because they, between them, represent, or 60% of the CRD looks to them as mayors for leadership. They represent 60% of the population.
And so I'm hopeful that one thing that will come out of this, and maybe the most important thing, would be an improved and better decision-making process.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'll put my Open Victoria hat on here. I'm a director of Open Victoria, and we advocate on behalf of enhanced, transparency, openness, and accountability. So I think that those are the fronts that we really have to push on for improved
openness,
transparency, and accountability for improved decision making. Because if you have, which we don't have a lot of, openness and transparency. Openness around, or transparency around what decisions are being made, who's making them, what information are they using. And then openness in terms of easy access by the public to that same information. Once the public is equipped with that, whether it be just an individual, a citizens group, an advocacy group, doesn't matter. If they have easy access to that information, they in turn can turn around and hold their elected representatives to account. That is, they can demand a thorough and sound justification for any decision that they make. And they can't demand that unless they have the information. So we get told, why are you building a sewage treatment plant? I asked one of the directors, why are you building a sewage treatment plant 2 or 3 years ago? And well, if we don't, we've been told to, and if we don't, I'll go to jail. That was it. I'm thinking, that's not a really sound and thorough justification for the decision, right? Would you care to elaborate? That was it. If we don't, I'm going to go to jail, and pardon me, we'll be fined.
And this is correct. I mean, this information was bandied about in public for a short period of time, which is that some of our decision makers seem to honestly feel that if they didn't do what they were told on sewage treatment, they were going to jail, which is, I mean, is that how decisions are made? And then the open house, they always have open houses. And they invite the public, and then they say we had all these open houses, so the public was consulted. But the open house,
that's the flip side.
Format is completely undemocratic.
Well, that's the flip side. So on one side, you've got enhanced decision making through accountability, where the populace, good citizens, have the access to the information and the decisions that are being made to hold them to account. Sometimes the citizens are asked to be engaged in different decisions. For example, you may be talking about the open houses that are used in the engagement process. And the problem with them is that then people are provided with very, very biased and misleading information. So I'll give you here's what Lisa Helps and Richard Atwell have to say about openness and transparency, accountability and engagement. So Mayor Atwell's victory speech was 9 words long, and I quote the entire victory speech on election night. Let's ring in the new era of open government, right? I'm encouraged. Mayor Helps, you go to her campaign, you go to her website, and she campaigned on, quote, embedding an ethic of openness and public participation in all civic processes, and, quote, continually drawing on the wisdom and expertise of the public, and, final quote, empowering residents as co-creators of city policy. Now I hear that, I'm pumped, I'm excited. That's great, that's what we're after. We're after engagement. The problem is that there are a number of impediments to that kind of engagement. And one we ran into during the election campaign. Open Victoria published a number of voting records of both CRD representatives on sewage specifically, and City of Victoria representatives on about 15 of the most significant votes.
Yeah, which was a Herculean task.
A Herculean task.
A great job for democracy. I mean, basically what you did was you collected the voting records of at least the city councillors in Victoria, and showed fairly clearly how they voted on important issues. And what could be more fundamentally important to us as the citizens than knowing how our elected representatives vote on important issues? But strangely, this information is very difficult to come by.
It's there, but to get it, it takes hours and hours. And there's just a handful of us doing this work, right?
So do you think this is going to change now?
Well, what we're going to do, Open Victoria is going to do, is approach the city. We're going to take Mayor Atwell up and Mayor Helps up on their campaign, commitments and promises. We'd like to help them. We bring expertise to the table, and we bring a lot of experience. So the first thing that we can help them to do is to make the access to voting records more accessible, user-friendly. So anybody at any time can generate a report on an issue of interest to them. So easily searchable database. I want to know who voted how on all votes related to homelessness. I want to know who voted how on all votes related to infrastructure items over, $10,000, something like that.
Can that
Boom.
be done?
Well, it certainly can't be done now, the current way it's structured,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That would
yeah.
take you years.
But that's possible to do, so we can find
of
this
course.
information. Yeah.
And that's an easy fix.
I mean, how did we get into this pathetic mess? I mean, why is that? Why is it the case that it is so bad now? That's a disgrace, and who's responsible for that? And how long has it been like that?
Well, I'm just going to look forward here, and like I say, really try to work, try to partner up with these two mayors, because that's what they seem quite committed to, and really see, they see its importance, because they see the role that citizens can play in improved decision making. Go back to the accountability thing. If I'm a decision maker and I know that everybody has access to essentially the same information that I do, and they're going to hold me to account on my decisions, I'm probably going to make better decisions. I'm probably going to be sure that my decisions are very defensible in terms of them being, having a thorough and sound justification for them.
And one of the requirements for our elected representatives making decisions is that they are actually representing what the citizens who elected them want. And that, to me, is of the most fundamental importance. Our elected representatives should be representing us. And I mean, what I see instead over the last number of years, federally, provincially, and municipally, is that there's another agenda at play. They work for that other agenda for some strange reason, and they feel their job is to manage us on behalf of this other agenda instead of representing us. And if we can't fix that up, then nothing's going to change. But I think what you're saying is on the right track.
Well, I'd like to think so. Again, picking up on Mayor Helps's promise to, empower residents and business owners as co-creators of city policy. That's great news. That, again, the trick is they can't tap into our wisdom and expertise if we're basically only going to be given, biased and very, very misleading information. When you go back to the Blue Bridge and you look at it as an engagement process, the referendum was an engagement process at the highest level of influence, and that's, I forget what it's called. I think it's called empowerment, and that means on the influence scale, you're right at the top, and the city is obligated to do what you tell them to do. So that was the good news, right? We were going to be empowered to tell the city, our representatives, what to do on the replacement. The problem was that they didn't come through on their promise of providing citizens with objective and balanced information. And so if you're going to draw on the wisdom and expertise of the good citizens, you can't feed them public relations stuff, because then the wisdom they provide you with is invalidated. It's corrupted by, garbage in, garbage out. That's what happens with that's what happened with the referendum. I mean, if they had been provided with balanced and objective information, they might well have said no to this, request to build a new bridge.
Oh, I think I can guarantee it. There was so much misinformation. People thought how much was the referendum about? Do you remember?
It was $77 million.
Okay. And the story we were given basically was that it was going to cost more to repair the old bridge than to build the new bridge at $77 million. But In fact, the initial estimation from the engineers to do the repair, and that was the suggestion, was under $10 million. So, I mean, we were being misled by a factor of 7. And in the end, people voted to build a new bridge because they thought that it was going to be cheaper.
Yeah,
it was all nonsense.
Well, it's one thing, and the thing that is really quite damaging is if the city says to the good citizens, we're going to provide you with information about the bridge. There's no guarantee it's going to be impartial. Then you have your guard up saying, uh-oh, they're going to give us a sales job. And then you can basically assess the information accordingly, because that's what you're expecting. But when they say that we're going to provide you, this is the promise, the foundation promise of their engagement policy, balanced and objective information, you let your guard down. And you think, oh, this is balanced and objective, I should make my decision on it, and I can trust these guys. And it was the biggest public relations job ever seen in the history of the city. It was absolutely disgraceful. The CRD tried to do the same thing with the Viewfield sewage treatment plant, where they secretly bought up that chunk of property in Esquimalt, and rather than having the plant on McLaughlin Point, they were going to put it into this right cheek by jowl with the residential area in the view. It was on Viewfield, the Viewfield property. There, what happened is that a lot of people got involved and said, hey, the information you're getting is bogus. We showed up at every one of their open houses and called them to task. Said, this is nonsense, this is misleading, this is biased. And they had to shut the process down early. And that shouldn't have to happen because they have the same promise as the City of Victoria. Impartial information.
And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's ridiculous that citizens like you and all the others have to fight the people we're paying in order to get honest information. You know, there are some major development issues coming up in Victoria, over fairly major buildings being built in and around the downtown area, including the Bosa development at the corner of Pandora and Vancouver. And I don't know if there's been a fair public policy or public participation with any of those issues. So is the new council going to start doing something immediately, or?
Well, I mean, it's the same process in the sense of being given due notice, being given all of the information, making sure that the information is balanced and impartial. If you introduce that...
But then they've also got to listen to what you say.
And tap in, well, as Mayor Helps says, tap into the wisdom of the citizens. So they have to, they have to ensure that the information is impartial and unbiased.
Well, we shall see. I'm maybe a little bit hopeful, and we'll see. I mean, if it goes democratically, then I'm all for it. John, thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.
And thank you for watching Citizens Forum this week.